Hello and welcome to another edition of Luminar Coffee Break. I'm your host, Vanelli. Now joining me today is my co-host, Angela Andrieux. Hello, Angela.
Hey Vanelli, good to see you and happy Friday.
Good. Now, what do we have on our agenda for today?
Well, let me grab my handy dandy notepad here so I can remember exactly what we've got going. So the two topics that you covered this week were how many catalogs should you have in Luminar AI and best practices for editing raw photos. And I discussed how to load photos into Luminar AI. Pretty basic topic, but it never hurts to go over the basics. And how to enhance colors in light painted photos. We dove into steel wool photography and how to do it and how to be safe about it. And I showed you one of my images. A lot of fun stuff.
Well, hey, that's awesome. You know what I'll do is I'll start first. I'll dive right in. The topic of should we have one or many Lightroom catalogs? And I'm glad you're with me here because we can do this more like interactive. And people online, please let us know what your thoughts are. Hello, Pat. Hello, Julie. Now, I'm going to backtrack for a moment. When I started with Lightroom, I just had one catalog for everything. And the reason behind that was with Lightroom, I used SmugBug. There were so many other things that I had to use add-ons, where if I created a new catalog in Lightroom, I had to create all those add-ons with it. Okay. Then if there was an update, not only did I have to update this catalog, but I had to update all the other catalogs that had those add-ons. So I said the heck with it. One catalog, that was my reasoning. And then I did, and we also taught this week how to back up your Luminar catalogs, because back then I backed up my Lightroom catalog the way I thought I should. I just dragged and dropped it, put it where I wanted it. Come to find out, it was corrupt. So if you are using Lightroom still, use the backup inside Lightroom, back it up, then copy it to wherever you want. I didn't do that, so I lost all of those edits I've ever done. They were lost, and it scared the daylights out of me, but thank God I followed the 3-2-1 backup plan. And the third copy I had was in the cloud, and like you know, CrashPlan and Backblaze, they save versions of your backup. Like I had 30 versions back. I found it, and I was able to restore it, so I lost 6 months worth of work. Now, let's fast forward. Luminar comes along, and my entire workflow changed. Now, Luminar is my primary software that I use. It's still using catalog, all right? And in fact, you know what? I mean, I'm sorry about this. So now it's still using a catalog. So with that being said, I started out with the original intention of using just one Luminar catalog. Well, that catalog got extremely large, and then if it gets over, I had a little over 30,000 images in it. The problem with that is it's so large, and most of those images I don't work with anymore. I want them, I want to know where they are, but I don't work with them all the time. It was just slowing the daylights out of Luminar, so Harrington suggested multiple catalogs. And now that's where I'm at right now, is I have a catalog for, let's say, sports. I have a catalog for models, adults and children. I have a catalog for my general work. So now that I have all these different catalogs, I know exactly where those are. And then I just put them in. Now, with you, Angela, I mean, how many catalogs do you have?
I think I have 6 or 7, but really only 2 or 3 that I use. And they're pretty much project specific. My personal library, see, I'm one of those that's still using Lightroom. So I have one massive catalog for Lightroom. I did try to use multiple catalogs back in the day with Lightroom. It got to be very cumbersome, so I merged them all together. And now I have one massive Lightroom category that goes all the way back to, I'd say probably about 2001. So tons and tons of images there. But for Lightroom, or for Luminar, I go with a project specific. So When we're doing coffee breaks, I have a coffee break catalog. When I'm doing a presentation for a specific group, I have a presentation catalog. I've got ones, for different purposes. So it's a little bit different than probably the everyday user, but having smaller catalogs in Luminar AI is really nice because it makes your system run a little bit faster. It makes the software run a little bit faster. And it's definitely the way to go with Luminar.
Awesome. All right. Well, our good friend Julie, we'll pop this up here. The catalog, let's put it, I'm so sorry. Where is comments? There we are.
Well, I can go ahead and read them here. I know Pat said, so Julie is talking about she lost her Luminar 4 catalog, couldn't find the pictures. When she found them, didn't know what to do with them, so she just started over. Sometimes that's what needs to happen, but hopefully, you're able to, your pictures were all secure. If you were able to back up that catalog, you should be able to reconnect any lost edits. So if you need help with that, definitely reach out to our support team. They're pretty awesome at getting those things supported out. That's support@skylum.com.
Awesome.
And then I see that Pat has a question about Luminar X and isn't getting most of her Luminar X content. Go to your Skylum account at the skylum.com website and go to the Luminar X membership section. You'll be able to access all of your content that you've been delivered so far there and download them. If you need help with installing them, let us know. We'll happily walk you through it.
Well, that's awesome. All right. There we go. Yeah, for some reason, I don't know why I lost our comments on that one. But so to help Julie out to understand a little bit more about catalogs, here we go. Catalogs, Julie, let's do it this way. If you're using Luminar just as a standalone program, if you're not using it, as a plugin for Lightroom or Photoshop, you're using it as a standalone program, then what we were just talking about, project-specific catalogs versus just one massive catalog, is kind of the way to go. If you're using it as a Lightroom or a Photoshop plugin, here's a quick tip. Let me jump in. And for Julie, this is where the catalogs are. File, Catalog, Show and Explorer. Now, traditionally, the default is right here. They put it into your pictures folder. I personally don't like having my catalogs in my picture folder. All right? So, I've created a folder called Luminar Catalog, or Luminar AI Catalog. Inside here, like Angela mentioned, I like to use project-specific catalogs. So here we have, coffee break. And by the way, when I put a erase me in there, that means I know I could delete that catalog with just an experiment. My photography, New Haven Camera Club, presentation, sports, and so on. So those are catalogs that I created. Now, if you're using Luminar, like I said, as a plugin, my recommendation is to make a blank catalog. And you do that right here, real simple. File, New, Catalog, create a new catalog. Now that catalog, like I just mentioned, will come over here to Luminar AI Catalogs. I already have a bunch of blank ones, but in fact, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to name it Blank 3, but I'm going to delete this one while I'm here. There we go. I might as well delete Blank 2. All right. So now I have a new catalog I'm creating, and I'm going to name it Blank 2. Version 2. All right. So now it's a blank catalog. When I hit save, what's going to happen is it's going to come in with a catalog with no photos in it. Nothing is added. Why is that important? Well, because then if you're using it as a Lightroom or a Photoshop plugin, it's going to come in here. There's no catalog. There's no images in your catalog, so it's going to be faster. Boom, and it bounces it back to Lightroom or Photoshop. Now, Julie, if you are using it as a standalone program, That's when Angela and I suggested you create right here, here's my most recent, you create project specific catalogs. And here, for example, I'm using Coffee Break. So now Coffee Break is that catalog, or the catalog that holds all these edits. So if I come up here to all the photos, and I say, you know what, just show me the edited photos. All of these are the photos that I've edited. It'll take a second for it to refresh. But now I have all of those edits there. If I lose this catalog, and here it is, catalog, show. If I lose this catalog, then all the changes I've made inside Luminar are going to be gone. All right? So that's why it's very important to make sure that this catalog right here, my coffee break, you back this up. Now, in your case, Julie, you said you lost your images. Well, what happened is, here's your backup. It automatically creates a backup. If Luminar won't start, then just go back, let's say to the very first one here, and it shows you the dates they were created. This right here is a catalog. The only difference is you would put the extension right here, Luminar AI, you would add it to this as an extension. And then that will open this as your catalog. So if you lose all your images, for whatever reason it gets corrupt, Luminar won't start up, take one of these backups, add the word Luminar AI, .Luminar AI on the end of it, boom, and then open that and you're good to go. All right? Now, good, so 1 second, so we have that set. So, Angela, I don't want this to turn into a zip class, so we're going to leave it at that. So catalogs are the foundation of Luminar AI. It stores a reference where all your photos are. Protect it, protect it, protect it. All right?
So Julie had a question. Can Luminar 4 catalogs go into the one for Luminar AI? And the answer to that is unfortunately no. Luminar 4 and Luminar AI are so different. I know a lot of the tools look the same, but the under the hood stuff is so very different that the catalog for Luminar 4 cannot go into Luminar AI. So if you have an established catalog in Luminar 4, keep Luminar 4 installed on your system. You can always go back and use that program side by side with Luminar AI. And if you wanted to, you can point Luminar AI to those same original photos. Luminar AI won't show the edits, but you can then re-edit them in Luminar AI if you wish. So awesome. That answers that question, hopefully. Bernie asked about best processing practices for birds. I added that to our queue of ideas, so look for that in the future. Let's see here. What else do we have?
Good. Yeah, then Julie noticed you said so.
Nope. It's still showing me what's new. Can't get into groups or tutorials, etc. I tried copying the screen, but it won't let me paste that into comments.
I think she's talking about Luminar X, maybe, Pat? Yeah, just verify if she's talking about Luminar X.
Yeah, if you could clarify that, Pat, that would be great.
But now for Julie, she's talking about, if let's say you're photographing your garden, should you make a catalog just of your garden? Well, let's think about this. If you photograph not just your garden, but in your area you photograph a ton of botanical gardens, you can have a catalog called Botanical Gardens. That's the name of your catalog, Botanical Gardens. Now, name the botanical gardens you go to. And in this case, it would be my garden, my backyard. Give it a name. So let me do this real quick. Let me share my screen. So let's do this real quick. And Angela, again, make sure you stop me if I start going down a rabbit hole. All right. So Julie, here we are. My particular root folder is called _photography. So this is where all of my images are. Now I'm pretending I'm you. So I'm going to right click, new folder, and I'm going to be really embarrassed. I am so sorry, everyone. Alexa, How do you spell botanical?
Botanical is spelled B-O-T-A-N-I-C-A-L.
I'm the world's worst speller. So there. Stop laughing, Angela. I hear you. So here we are. I created a folder. I created my folder. Now I'm going to double click on that folder. And what I can do is create a new folder called My Garden. I'm so sorry. 1 second. There. My Garden. Now, another place I usually photograph that's local here is Lou Gardens. And I believe it's spelled L-E-U Gardens. All right. And so there's a ton of different gardens.
We have a quick comment here from Pat. Apparently her echo started also spelling for you. That's hilarious.
So now, notice I'm labeling different gardens in here. Okay. Now here's what's really cool about what Luminar does. I'm going to come back over here. I can create, so I can come in here, File, Catalog, New Catalog. I'm going to give it a name, but I want to store it right here under Luminar AI Catalog. There we go. And let's call this Gardens. So now I called it Gardens. It's going to come up completely blank. Now I get to add that folder we just created. So now when I add that folder, of course there's no images in there yet. I can find it. Here we go. It's not only going to add that main folder, but guess what? It's also going to add all the subfolders that are underneath. I mean, how cool is that? Now, let's say Angela comes for a visit. I'm just going to show this in Explorer. Angela comes for a visit, and we decide to photograph, oh God, Morigami Art Garden. I have no idea how to spell that. Let's do this. New folder. We photographed the Florida Tech Gardens. So we photographed Florida Tech, and I added that to my directory or my subfolder, and then I dump all of my images in there. Well, guess what? When I come back over here, we'll give it a second to refresh. This is going to refresh in a couple seconds. There it goes. Now look at that. How cool is that, Julie? Now I have my Florida Tech Garden is in here. And notice it's alphabetical. It's alphabetized because I created it on my hard drive or my system, and it brought it in. So any images I have in these folders will automatically appear inside Luminar. All right. So there we have it. Let me go back to Angela. There, Angela. I want to make sure I don't go down that path to where we over-explain.
Well, I do have another approach to share with regard to folders and those things, and kind of how I bring images into Luminar AI.
Good.
But if you wanted to share my screen, I wanted to quickly show about Luminar X and where to find your assets. So I have my browser pulled up on the screen. I'm at the skylum.com website. And if I go over here to my account and just mouse over my account, there's my Luminar X membership. If I click on that, it shows that it's active. And here's all of the assets that I have access to right now, as well as my classes, templates, all of the stuff is available right here. So if you have a Luminar X membership, this is where you go to get your assets. If you go over to Luminar AI and up here at the top and you go to Marketplace under Explore, you'll see that some of these say included with Luminar X membership. If you click on this and you want to say learn more, you wanted to get this, the catch is as these come in monthly deliveries. Just because it's included doesn't mean it's necessarily been delivered to you yet. If you don't have it available here under my account and Luminar X software, it means it'll come to one of your future deliveries. If you want to get it now, what you can do is if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you have a special marketplace code that you can
Oh, I didn't
use
know that.
to go ahead and, yeah, so you can go ahead and buy it with the discount. And then if you get it in a future delivery, all you need to do is contact support and they will give you a different pack or let you select a different pack in lieu of the one that you had already purchased. So if you need it now, that's how you can get it. You can get it for a discount. And then later when that delivery comes with the pack that you already have, just contact support and they'll take care of you because we don't want to make you buy things multiple times. That's never our goal.
Wow, that's
So
awesome.
hopefully that's helpful. All right, so over to my Luminar screen here. I set up, this is my cat Glenlivet, and I set up a catalog for 2021. So where for my work with Skylum, I set up project-based catalogs. For my own with Lightroom specifically, but I would do this with Luminar if it was my home base as well, I prefer to go by date. So let me go ahead and click on my folder over here. I'm going to just show in Finder, and you can see what I'm talking about. So this is my file structure here. I've got my pictures, and this is all on an external drive, my pictures, and everything here is by year. Underneath that, I have the specific dates that I shot, and here's the folder that we're in, and this is, oops, pull this back, Cats, mostly Glenn. And these are all my raw files with pictures of Glenn. So what I did was just bring my images into this folder and then point Luminar AI to this folder under 2021. And I'm in a catalog that I called 2021. So if I go up to File and Catalog and go Show in Finder, what I've done here, again, on that external drive, I have my Luminar catalogs, a folder for 2021, and here's my 2021 Luminar AI catalog. So a different approach to it. Some people like to categorize things by topic, by shoot, by, there's many different ways that you can categorize your things. I prefer to go by date. So another approach to that same thing. But as far as getting your images into Luminar AI, the easiest way to do that is to go up to the plus button, click on add a folder, and that's how I added this folder of Cats, mostly Glenn. Once I'm in there, I can separate things out into albums. So if I go here to my folder and I click on all photos, you're going to see that if I scroll down, most of these images are of Glenn in different varying poses, but there's a handful of my other cat, Macallan. So I created an album for Macallan, and I can drag my favorites of him into that folder as well. And you can have your folders set up by year and have your albums, which are basically shortcuts to those images, set up for your topics or your shoots or other things. So personal preference.
I like that. And again, like you said, it's how we chose to do it. And I do have the date concept only when I do multiple shots. So in that particular case, like the gardens at Lou Gardens, if we went and shot at Lou Gardens, I would have whatever date we shot it, and I may even put I was with Angela, or Vanelli and Angela shot this. Okay. Just something to remind me. And so when I open up Lou Gardens, I can have like 15 different dates. And I know exactly where they are. So, well, that was good. So exactly. I hope that helped you on that. And yes, are you doing a edit of your cat? Was that one of your?
No, actually, I wasn't doing any edits. This one here, if you want to share my screen again, this one here on the right, this was actually a single image edit. I took it with my phone. I airdropped it to my computer and loaded it up in Luminar AI. I didn't have a folder that I was bringing in. I just wanted to edit this one picture. So the way I did that was go to the plus button and clicked on add image. And now I can find that in my single image edits. The cool thing about this, I'm going to hit the G key on my keyboard to go back to the grid view. I can then take things that are in my single image edits, and I can also drag and drop them into various albums. So if you click here on Macallan,
yes, you could do that for Mac and Windows, but Mac has an extra feature.
What's the extra feature?
You can drag those into a folder, correct?
I don't typically move things around from folders once they're in them, so I haven't even tried. I do drag and drop to albums, though.
We can't, unfortunately.
Oh.
I know.
That's a bummer.
So if that were on your thumb drive, or like Julie was saying, she has them in her camera, you could drag them from your camera into the single image edit, and then create folders that way too. So
Sure. Now, if you have a whole folder of images, I really highly recommend creating a folder on your hard drive, putting those images onto the folder, and then
exactly.
adding the folder specifically. The thing with single image edits is I kind of see this as kind of a temporary place. You can categorize them into your albums, but single image edits can get really full. And if you happen to, say I put this on my desktop and that's where it was residing, and I get into a cleaning fury one day and I go and I delete a bunch of files, I clean a bunch of things that I think I don't need off my desktop, all of a sudden I'm going to have a missing image here. So it'll have that little exclamation point, and everywhere, every album that I've put that in is going to have that same little error in there until I remove this from my single image edits. So the thing with single image edits you have to remember is if they're still tied into this particular shortcut, Luminar is still trying to point to them wherever they are. I find that I'm much less likely to accidentally move or delete something when they're in a specific folder that I have as part of my organized structure. The one-off stuff, I usually don't pay too much attention to. So, but that's just me.
All right, Angela. Well, great. So what do you have for us now?
So the other thing that I showed you guys this week was how to edit photos from a light painting shoot. And I specifically talked about steel wool photography. Let me go ahead and change my catalog here. So I'm going to go to catalog, open recent, and go to my coffee break catalog so I can show you those images. We'll let that load up here for just a moment. All right, almost there.
And for everyone listening,
Okay, so I'm going to go down.
It's hard for us because we are working photographers, but we have to balance the stuff that we do for coffee break also within this.
Yes.
Right?
Yep, that's exactly right. All right, so steel wool photography has to do with taking actual steel wool, metal, putting it into the head of a whisk, a kitchen whisk, stainless steel, attach a rope to the end of that, light that steel wool on fire, and then you fling it around and it sends sparks of molten burning metal everywhere. And you stand back, you take a long exposure. This is a 30-second exposure at f8, and it creates a super, super cool effect. Now, you are literally playing with fire. So if you decide to try this, make sure you take some safety precautions, have a fire extinguisher with you, and make sure you wear long sleeve, closed-toed shoes. If these little bits of flame hit you, they hurt. Also highly recommend that you keep a UV filter on your camera. So the first time I went out and shot still wool, I just went with my naked lens, and I was very, very lucky. The second time I went out, I had heard about some of these horror stories, so I go down to the camera store and I bought myself an inexpensive UV filter, threw it on the front of my camera, and that night this happened. And that is a tiny piece of molten fused steel wool to the front of my filter. If I hadn't had that filter in place, it would have been fused to my lens. Wow. And then you'd have to go get your lens repaired. So I rarely recommend putting cheap glass in front of your expensive glass, but this is one instance that I highly recommend it. So make sure you're safe. I included a couple of links in the original episode yesterday. So if you go back and watch that, check out those links. One of them is instructions, like really detailed on how to do this. The other one is a very cautionary tale of amateur photography gone wrong with steel wool and ended up causing some serious destruction. So please be safe if you decide to try this out. But if you do it, it's a lot of fun, really cool effects, and great thing to do if you're out with your camera club or a few photography friends.
Well, that's awesome, Angela. All right, I'm going to jump in. My second topic, let me pull it up here quick, was on camera raw, right? Now, with that, prefacing that, let me think. We have real world, so we have real world edit, and then what people teach. Angela and I both like showing you, hey, this is how we really do it. So we don't do theories and concepts. Here, this is how we would do this. The camera raw profile right here. I'm going to edit. It's under the light tool. Look at this. So I'm going to show you, this is the light tool. If you're new to Luminar, try to stay away from this because it is complicated. That one tool is right here. Look at this. Boom. it automatically improves color, detail, tone, depth of your image, and it does it using artificial intelligence. Here, again, if you're a new photographer, here's before, a good shot. There it is processed, and then you can do a little tweaking from there. So that's where you would start, and then typically I would come down here, you know, adjust my blacks a little bit, maybe bump up the shadows a bit. Maybe add a little contrast. All right, and there I am. Now I'm done, and I can move on to the next image. So, or I can come down here and save this as a new template. So if I wanted fast, easy edits, I would name this Save Template. So I'm going to show my templates. Here's one we just created. Let's rename it. Fast and easy. Or better yet, you know what? Let's call this starting point. So now I know that when I pull this image in, let's just go back. I'm going to the history tool, and notice every change I've made, it's in the history. So it's non-destructive, meaning I can always go back to my original. So here I am with templates. I could just do this to all my images. There's my starting point. Now I can either continue or move on. Now, that's the quickest and fastest way you can edit or develop your images. But the topic is strictly on raw processing. Now, I wanted to show you that because the last time I led with this, you know, showing people how to do it from here, and then I said, hey, well, here's another way of doing it, and somebody complained and said, why didn't you show it to me that way in the beginning? Now, if you're a stickler and you want to process using the raw format, then you open up the light tool, and again, you can go in any set order you want. I kind of like coming over here and selecting a camera profile. All right, so far nothing changed. Let's see the Adobe standard. Nope, so far it's pretty good. Look, this is if I shot it in black and white in the camera. That's right, this is a Canon, so Old Faithful, I think it's called. Yeah, Faithful. Camera Faithful. I'm going to stick with this one. All right? Now, I typically set the white balance. You can either put it as shot or just go through each of them. Oh, wrong one. Let me get back to it. I hit the arrow keys thinking I could just drill down, but in this case I have to actually click on the drop-down menu and go down to each category. So this is daylight. And let's give it a second to regenerate. You'll notice it's taking the time up here. As soon as that's done, I'll have access. There we go. So here's cloudy. Notice the change it's making. Shade. We actually like shade. Tungsten, she's going to turn it blue. Fluorescent lighting, same thing. And then flash photography. Okay, so I have a choice of doing that. I really can't see her eyes, Angela. Yeah, I can't see her eyes. Normally, I would take the eyedropper tool, and neutral gray would be her eyes. But let's try this. So I'm going to click over here. All right, and it did a pretty good job. Look at that. Now, typically, Angela, with me, I notice it adjusts my tint for me, because that's the hardest thing I find I have to adjust is tint. So I like how this looks. Here's before and after. Look at that. And that's just by changing the white balance and the profile. If I'm always going to work with this camera, come down here and just select Set Profile. Now, every time Luminar sees that that image was shot with your camera, it's going to apply this profile to it. All right, so now I have it set. I don't need to mess with temperature and tint because that's what the eyedropper tool just did. Exposure, I try to stay away from that unless I absolutely, positively have to use it. All right? So let me come over here, bump up the smart contrast, bring out some of the shadows, too much, and enrich the blacks. Maybe bring out some of the whites. There we go. How do you, Angela, do you like to use curves?
Once in a while, I'll give it a slight S curve.
Yeah, just slight. I'm horrible, and I'll be the first to admit, at curves, because I end up doing one of these things. I'll start out good, and then all of a sudden, look, you see, look how I'm destroying her.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Ooh.
I always do that. So in lieu of curves, if anything, I would do something like this, just to make the whole thing darker. And then I would come up here to my good friend and say, help me, X and AI. And then this is what's going to pull me out of it. Give it a second. Look at that. Ta-da. And then come down here and save it. So look how long that took to use the raw converter. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're used to it, dive right in. If you're new, just start messing with enhanced AI or accent AI first, then gradually start to develop into the raw process right up in here. All right? Once again, before,
Yep.
after, huge difference. And again, I can save it. And that save is under templates. My template is right here. Let's rename this to, we call that starting point. Maybe starting point raw. And now I have a choice. I can either start with this version here, or what I really like, I can come over here to the raw, which I like too. So again, it just gives you different options. I think I like this because of the colors. Yep. And then I can even go back and edit this one a little bit more to kind of match those colors. Yeah. See, look at the temperature. There we go. And then resave it. All right? So, Angela, what do you think? Oh, I lost my camera. All right, so Angela, what do you think on that?
I think it's great. And actually, if you get a chance to share my screen, I'll pop back in with that light painting photo one more time. And this ties really well into the whole raw development thing here as well. So there's my original image. The colors are not great. The biggest thing that I did here was adjust the white balance. So when you're shooting at night, you can have many different types of light that are influencing the image. I think what I had done when I had this, I'm not sure if I was on auto or if I had set it to daylight, but the colors are not great. By adjusting mostly the white balance and a couple of other things, I was able to make the colors look a lot more appealing. And I love how it turned my dark sky into an almost blue, which is more kind of what I remember seeing. I don't know if it was actually that way or not, but if we go over here to edit and take a look at the light panel, I ended up doing a custom white balance. So the first thing I did was pull my temperature. Let's just go back and switch this to as shot, and you can see the big difference here. So give that a second. You can see it's very, very orange. And there's kind of a greenish hue out here on the pillars, which are supposed to be gray. And then the sky is just kind of muddy looking. So by taking that temperature slider way down, I'm able to make that fire look a lot cooler. And no pun intended, but cooling off the color temperature there. And then there's still a little bit of that greenish hue hanging out in there. So I took my tint slider and I bumped that up just a bit. And I really like what that does to the image. I do find that at least on my computer, to my eyes, even when I use the white balance presets here, I almost always in Luminar have to go in and take that tint slider up a little bit. It's almost all of the presets are a little too much on the green side for me. So adding about 10 to the magenta side of the tint really is a nice correction to my eye. So that's the biggest thing I did to correct this image. We did a few other things with the mood tool. I just added a little bit of extra redness to it actually. So if I turn that off and then back on, you can see that gave it more of that magenta tint as well. So, but the biggest thing that I did was that light tool. So again, there's the before and the after. So big difference without a whole lot of work.
Hey, I'm back.
You're back, yay.
So, well, that's
all
awesome,
right. So I
Angela.
think that pretty much covers everything. I love that Julie said that I think she was referring to when you saved your template with your raw development stuff, made a template for something. She went through in about 10 minutes, processed 133 photos. That's awesome. And that's exactly what our goal is with this software, to enable you to make edits that you like, that are effective, that look good, and to do it efficiently. So awesome.
Well, that's great. All right. So, hey, Angela, thank you so much for joining us. And thank everyone
very welcome.
else
Glad to be
for
here.
joining us here on our coffee break. And we'll see you at the next coffee break.